Most of Week 5 is in the books, and it started back on Thursday night with the game between the 49ers and Rams. The 49ers defeated the Rams 26-23 at SoFi in a game where Mac Jones threw for over 340 yards and 2 touchdowns as the 49ers improved to 4-1. This was a very impressive win for the 49ers as they were without several players in this game like Brock Purdy, George Kittle, Ricky Pearsall, and Jawan Jennings to name a few, and Nick Bosa on the defensive side of the ball as well. I don't know what the rest of the season entails for the 49ers, but right now, Kyle Shanahan is undoubtedly in the Coach of the Year conversation with how this team is playing and with how many injuries they've had. The offense was clicking, and if they can get healthier and play anywhere close to this, well, they're going to be a problem. The Rams are now 3-2 after this loss, and if you're a Rams fan, this was a very frustrating loss to put it lightly. Obviously, the kicking troubles played a big part in this game, as well as the final play call, which I did not think was a great play call, and I would have rather had the ball in Puka Nakua's hands with the game on the line. I'm not going to extreme overreact and say the Rams are done because, well, they're not. This is a very good football team that unfortunately has 2 losses in games they could have won, which is better than getting blown out and having next to no chance to win at all. These mistakes are correctable, and the Rams are still a very good football team. The Vikings defeated the Browns across the pond in the first game on Sunday to improve to 3-2 in what was a very stressful game for Vikings fans. This was anything but a smooth win for Minnesota, as Jordan Addison did not play in the first quarter due to a coach's decision, then came back and caught the game-winning touchdown pass, and Justin Jefferson also had 100 yards for the second consecutive week in the win as well. The Vikings' run defense looked problematic throughout a lot of this game, as Quinshon Judkins ran for over 100 yards, but when the defense needed to make a stop in the fourth quarter with 3 minutes to play, they stepped up. The Vikings, unfortunately, like a lot of other NFL teams right now, are extremely banged up, and their Week 6 bye could not have come at a more perfect time, as they left London with a win and have a winning record entering their bye. For Cleveland, it was nice to have a starting quarterback not commit any turnovers, as that was one of the biggest problems with Joe Flacco, and considering the circumstances, I thought Dillon Gabriel played a fine game in his NFL debut against a Brian Flores defense. As mentioned, Quinshon Judkins played great, and if you are a Browns fan, this has to be one you felt like that got away. They had tremendous field position several times in this game, yet couldn't put up 20 points again, and we are now 5 games into the year with Cleveland having a grand total of 0 games with 20 points. I think some criticism is fair for head coach Kevin Stefanski for weirdly abandoning the run game at times when it was rolling, but the Browns are now 1-4, and the biggest thing for them is to let Dillon Gabriel continue to start in what is a clear rebuilding or retooling, because the 2025 draft class has been phenomenal, a retooling year. The Houston Texans defeated the Baltimore Ravens with a score of 44-10, and CJ Stroud threw for 4 touchdowns in a whomping. This game was seemingly over from the start, as Houston was up 24-3 at half, and it was never much of a game. For Houston specifically, you can only play who's on the field, and this was a huge step in the right direction for them because of how they finished the Titans game in Week 4, and then, of course, how they played in Week 5 against the Ravens. Their work is certainly cut out for them off of the Week 6 bye, but they held the ball for over 36 minutes, they more than doubled the Ravens' yards, CJ Stroud looked good, and they won the turnover battle 3-0. This was a near-picture-perfect Sunday for the Texans. Now, with the Ravens, you have to start with how many guys they had out, and it was a laundry list, as they had guys out like Lamar Jackson, Ronnie Stanley, Kyle Hamilton, Nnamdi Madubuike, and Marlon Humphrey, to name a few, because there was plenty more, but this was a poor effort from the Ravens in this game. There are a lot of Ravens fans that want defensive coordinator Zach Orr fired, and I get where they're coming from and think they'll get their wish soon, but there's not a lot of positive things to say about the Ravens at this point in time, especially after a 34-point home loss, and needless to say, it's ugly in the Charm City. The Saints defeated the Giants 26-14 in Jackson Dart's second career start, and believe it or not, this was Spencer Rattler's first career win as a starter. Rashid Shaheed had a big 87-yard touchdown for the Saints, and the Saints defense stepped up as they forced 5 turnovers in this game. Obviously, there's no major takeaways for the Saints, like they're winning 10 games or anything like that, but it's always nice to watch your favorite team win a football game, and that's what matters most. If there is any takeaway for New Orleans from this game, their kicker, Blake Group, missed 2 field goals in this game and is now 10 of 15 on the year, so there can certainly be a conversation there, but a win is a win, and good for Kellen Moore to secure his first win as an an NFL head coach. Now, with the Giants, when they jumped out to a 14-3 lead, I thought they were going to win and was hoping this would be the start of a little run. Not a big run, but baby steps in the right direction, and unfortunately they turned the ball over at the worst times imaginable, and the big one specifically, the one run back for a touchdown, was all she wrote. They had 2 touchdowns on their first 2 drives for the first time in a couple of years, and were blanked the rest of the game. And to be outscored 23-0 against an 0-4 with a coach already in the hot seat team, well, there's a reason the Giants are 10-29 since the start of the 2023 season, and that does not happen by accident. The Denver Broncos beat the Eagles 21-17 in a come-from-behind win as Bo Nix threw for over 240 yards and a touchdown on the road. This was a huge win for Denver as they improved to 3-2, and with the Jets and Giants as their next 2 games, there's a very real possibility this team is 5-2 through 7 games. 18 unanswered points for this team, and how Bo Nix played in the second half is what matters most, as there were certainly times in the first half where I had some thoughts on Bo Nix and certainly some questions, but credit where it's due and good for the Broncos. Denver, of course, had a DPOY last year in Pat Surtain, and Nick Bonito certainly should be in that conversation this year. With the Birds, I understand the frustration on the no call on Dallas Goedert on the second to last play of the game, and while that is frustrating, so is putting up 17 points with as much talent as this offense has. And there's times where it seems like everything clicks with OC Kevin Patullo, and you'll get a drive here or there where everything looks great, and then quarters or even halves of games where it doesn't. And the Birds are still 4-1, and they play the Giants, who just committed 5 turnovers on Thursday with a rookie quarterback, so admittedly I would be shocked if they're not 5-1, but as we always say, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and while this loss is frustrating, it's not season-altering by any means. The Panthers beat the Dolphins 27-24, and they started this game about as ugly as you could get. Their first possession was a fumble in which Bryce Young dropped the football, not strip sacked, he just dropped the ball, and the second was a Bryce Young interception. At that point, I really thought Carolina was on to 2026, and especially when they got down 17-0 to the then 1-3 Dolphins of all teams. But credit to the Panthers, and especially Rico Dowdle for having a 200-yard rushing game and a dramatic come-from-behind win. And I know he was only targeted 3 times, but I'm also really happy for Xavier Legette, who entered this game with just 4 receptions for 8 yards on the year. No long-term projections for the Panthers or anything, or any major takeaways, but I couldn't be happier for Carolina and the Cardiac Cats, and especially their fans with how this game turned out. Also, shout out to the announcer from this game, because if you know, you know. He was electric. Now, with how bad their run defense was last year, holding Miami to 19 rushing yards was incredible, and unfortunately for the Dolphins, you blew a 17-point lead to a team that was 1-3, entering the game of course, and to a team that was 8-30 since the start of the 2023 season. I don't mean to be overdramatic, but do I need to say more? This type of loss, especially for a team who internally Miami believes they are better than, is a loss that should get people fired. Rico Dowdle ran for over 200 yards on your team, and you ran for 19. This is a bad team, and it's officially time to start over. The Cowboys beat the Jets 37-22, and if you watch this game, there was a lot of window dressing with this score relative to how the game was played. Dak Prescott threw for 4 touchdowns, Javonte Williams ran for over 130 yards, Ryan Flournoy had over 100 receiving yards, and this was a highlight reel day for the Cowboys. And a lot of credit goes to Dallas because they were very banged up entering this game. Admittedly, I had my doubts about Brian Schottenheimer entering the season as the team's head coach, but his team plays hard every week and they looked really good in this game. And this was a big game for Dallas because, as we mentioned, they were banged up, but I was also paying attention to see how this team would play coming off of a very taxing game physically in a 40-40 tie they had in Week 4 against Green Bay, from an energy standpoint. So, great win for Dallas as they are now 2-1. Now, on the other side of the coin, the Jets are 0-5 and have 0 takeaways on the season. They were down 30-6 late in the third quarter and even 37-14 with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. This is a very bad football team. There's no way around it. And I thought Aaron Glenn would be a breath of fresh air for this team, but we're 5 games in and I struggle to name any positives for this team outside of a player here or there. I expected a lot more from the Jets, but this is a nightmare. And to be clear from an expectation standpoint, more of a competitiveness, which we regularly do not see. And I legitimately think this team could win 3 games or less based on what we've seen in the first 5 games of the year. The Colts absolutely dominated the Raiders, and my two big takeaways for the Colts are another good game from Daniel Jones, and that Jonathan Taylor is playing at an offensive player of the year caliber level. I tweeted out this summer that JT and Bijan Robinson had the quietest 1,400-yard seasons in the history of the NFL last year due to how good Saquon, Derrick Henry, and Jahmyr Gibbs were in 2024, but I couldn't be happier for JT for him to receive the recognition he deserves. The Colts won by 34 points, Daniel Jones was relieved of his duties by Anthony Richardson, Indy won the turnover battle, and they had a huge bounce-back win after last week's game that they also probably should have won. Colts fans, enjoy this week because whenever you hear the phrase, "I wish I knew when we were in the good times," well, these are the good times. Now, with the Raiders, this is easily the most disappointing team relative to expectations 5 weeks into the year. I know Baltimore will come up, but they started Cooper Rush in Week 5 and have near double-digit starters out and also put up 40 on Buffalo back in Week 1. I know that was a loss, but needless to say, I don't think the Raiders would be able to do that. And I don't have a lot to say because of how poor this team has played through 5 games. Geno Smith looked terrific in the Week 1 game against New England, outside of a bad decision on an interception in that game, but now has 6 touchdowns to 9 interceptions on the year as he threw 2 more against Indy in Week 5, and it has not been a very nice season for the Raiders. And to quote Cam Ward, to keep it a buck, their language, ass. The Lions took a trip down I-75 to play the Bengals, or flew in their plane if we're being honest, but a lot of Lions fans took this trip down I-75 as Detroit beat Cincinnati 37-24. There was a point in this game where I thought it was going to get really ugly score-wise, but the Bengals battled back, credit to them, and the Lions won a game that was uglier than they would have liked. Detroit was up 28-3 at a point in this game, and Jared Goff threw 3 passing touchdowns, and Amon-Ra St. Brown had 100 yards, and it looked like a typical Lions game where they whomp a bad team and move on. But after a brutal first couple of quarters, Jake Browning threw 3 fourth-quarter touchdowns, and I don't think the Bengals would have won, but there was a safety to make it 37-24. The Bengals are not a great team, and it shows every week, and Jake Browning was particularly bad in the first 3 quarters, as there was a point where Jamar Chase had 3 tackles due to 3 Jake Browning interceptions. I think this game in a lot of ways played out very similarly to how you'd expect. The Lions took care of business, and there are things to clean up in the Motor City. I think they'll be fine in the long run, and with Cincinnati, this team deserves some credit for battling back, but they're 2-3 and are now 0-3 since Joe Burrow went down with the injury, and again, this is not a great team. I would summarize this game as the Lions were the Lions for 3 quarters, then Cincinnati played good for most of the 4th quarter, then took a safety, and that was that. One of the more shocking results from Week 5 was the Commanders beating the Chargers 27-10 in Jaden Daniels' return. Bill Krosky-Merritt and Deebo Samuel stepped up big time as star receiver Terry McLaurin was out, and they put up 27 points in a road win over a good team, which was huge for Washington. The Commanders' defense looked terrible in Week 4 against Atlanta as Michael Penix carved them up for over 300 yards, and they held Justin Herbert to 166 passing yards and even forced a timely interception late in the game to effectively seal the win. I've had a lot of questions about Washington in the early parts of the 25 season, but this team came to play in Week 5 and they were clearly the better team in this game. And it was also Washington's first time beating the Chargers in California since 1986. Now, for the Chargers, they jumped out to a 10-0 lead, and it was all downhill from there. Having both of your tackles out is obviously huge, and it reared its ugly head in this game, but I came away really disappointed with how undisciplined the Chargers were at times, especially for a Jim Harbaugh-coached team. Double-digit penalties is always going to be difficult to come back from, and especially in a game where you lose the turnover battle too. The Chargers have now lost back-to-back games after starting 3-0, and while I do think they will beat the Dolphins next week, I'm nowhere as confident in this team as I was just 2 weeks ago. Injuries, of course, play a part, and that needs to be noted, but 10 penalties is a bad look, especially for a coach who regularly preaches discipline and being a significantly more difficult team to beat. Bucs-Seahawks was one of the best games of the year, and it was undoubtedly one of the best uniform games of all time as the Bucs escaped the Emerald City with a 38-35 win. Unfortunately for Bucs fans, they have had their stress levels high throughout every game as they've all been close, but fortunately, they're 4-1, and there's a very real reality. They have the Offensive Rookie of the Year on their team in Emeka Egbuka. Egbuka had a 7-catch, 163-yard, 1-touchdown performance in this game, and this was a huge win for Tampa because of how many guys they had out. Going into Seattle and winning is a difficult task for any team, and for Tampa to win this game, coming off of a tough loss against Philly in Week 4, well, they're a very good team, and I can't wait to watch them play the 49ers in Week 6 and the Lions in Week 7, and not just with them, but with everyone. Hope they get healthier as this season goes on. For Seattle, obviously this loss hurts, and that's probably an understatement, but you put up 35 points and Sam Darnold threw for over 340 yards and 4 touchdowns. Jackson Smith-Njigba is also forcing himself into top 5 receiver conversations, and again, I know this loss in particular stings, but if you get healthy and clean up the turnovers, this team can compete with anyone. Now, I don't know about beat, and that's a much more complex conversation and one for another day, but to simply write the Seahawks off? No, this is a very good team, and I really enjoy watching this team play, and I think they'll be fine in the long run. The Titans, yes, the Tennessee Titans went out to Arizona and beat the Cardinals 22-21. This was a very abnormal game as Amari DiMercado, just a week after Adonai Mitchell of the Colts, dropped a touchdown on the goal line, dropped a touchdown for Arizona, which obviously allowed Tennessee to get back into the game. The Cardinals then intercepted Cam Ward, then fumbled the interception, and Tennessee recovered for a touchdown. This was one of the worst collapses in NFL history with the way things went down, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. I'm happy for the Titans to get their first win of the year, but I said this in the Week 5 preview that if they win, I think in some ways it's a loss because you have to keep Brian Callahan around for a few more weeks. If Tennessee lost the way this game was being played, I do think Brian Callahan would have been fired after this game. I also don't think Tennessee played particularly great in this game, and that's kind of been a staple of this team since Callahan has been the head coach. I'm happy for the fans and enjoy Victory Monday, of course. But for the Cardinals, this is my frustration with this team. The play calling at the end was classic Drew Petzing, and it's nothing short of maddening. The Cardinals are not a bad team, roster-wise, and I love the vision they have with the rebuild, but I think they have the wrong guys leading the rebuild, and unfortunately it shows time and time again. I think this is a classic case of a team that can compete with anybody, but if they play an elite team, I think we know the result. They'll lose, and unfortunately they're perpetually underwhelming. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe as we are closing in on 215,000 subscribers, and I truly cannot thank you guys enough for the support. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.